Back in the 1960s, computers were these massive, kind of mysterious machines that only experts could touch. But one guy had this really radical idea. What if everyone could use them? This is the story of the programming language he created to make that vision a reality. And it all starts with a simple question. Okay, so let me ask you something. When I say the programming language BASIC, what's the first name that pops into your head? Now, if you said Bill Gates, you're in good company. That's what most people think, right? I mean, Microsoft BASIC was on pretty much every early personal computer. But nope, that's not the right answer. And trust me, the real story is so much more fascinating. So here's what we're going to cover. We'll look at a visionary's journey, the huge challenge he ran into at Dartmouth, how he ended up inventing code for everyone, the programming revolution that followed, and finally, how his vision was ultimately fulfilled. The man behind the code, the person we're really talking about, is John Kemeny. He was a brilliant Hungarian-American mathematician. But to really get his vision for computing, you have to hear his backstory. Seriously, it's like something straight out of a movie. So, Kemeny was born in Hungary to a Jewish family. In 1940, his father saw the writing on the wall and got the family out to New York just before the Holocaust tragically claimed many of his relatives who had to stay behind. In America, Kemeny just thrived. He got into Princeton when he was only 17 years old and was soon pulled away to work on the Manhattan Project. That's where he first laid eyes on these massive, room-sized calculating machines. By the time he was 23, he already had his PhD. And get this, while he was at Princeton, he became Albert Einstein's mathematical assistant. Yeah, that Einstein. Kemeny used to cheekily say that his job was to check Einstein's calculations. Because, well, even geniuses can slip up on the math. That just gives you a sense of the kind of intellectual league this guy was playing in. Okay, so flash forward to 1953, Professor Kemeny arrives at Dartmouth College. He's just 27 years old, and he is a huge believer that computers are the future. But the moment he gets there, he runs into this massive brick wall. This was what computing was like back then. It was a process called batch processing, and it was a total nightmare. You'd write your program out on paper, punch it onto hundreds of little cards, hand that giant stack to a gatekeeper, and then you'd wait for hours. And if you made one single typo, you wouldn't know until the next day. It was slow, it was frustrating, and it was absolutely designed for an elite few. But Kemeny had a completely different idea. He believed computers weren't just for scientists and lab coats. They were a tool for everyone, students in every major, faculty in every department. At the time, this was a truly radical thought. So to make this vision happen, Kemeny and his colleague, Thomas Kurtz, knew they had to just reinvent the entire system. They didn't just need a new machine. They needed a whole new way for people to actually talk to it. First, they created a new language. They called it BASIC, which actually stood for Beginner's All-Purpose Symbolic Instruction Code. The name really says it all. It was designed from the ground up to be simple, forgiving, and easy to learn, using commands that were pretty close to plain English. Then, in the pre-dawn hours of May 1st, 1964, it happened. At 4 in the morning, 2 different programs, typed on 2 separate terminals, ran at the same time on their new system. The experiment worked. BASIC was alive. And this was the revolution they had started. They replaced that slow, expert-driven system with a new model called time sharing. Students could sit at a terminal, type their basic code, and get results back instantly. They had turned a frustrating hours-long ordeal into an interactive conversation with the machine. This combination of a simple language and instant feedback didn't just change Dartmouth. It was about to change the world. Within just a few years, Kemeny's vision was a reality on campus. A staggering 85% of Dartmouth students were using computers. And not just the math and science students, we're talking students in sociology, economics, even languages. This had never happened anywhere before. From Dartmouth, BASIC just exploded. It became the language of the new, smaller mini-computers. It was used to write some of the earliest computer games. And most importantly, when the first personal computers like the Apple II and the IBM PC arrived, BASIC was the language they spoke. And yes, this is where Bill Gates comes in. He and Paul Allen wrote a version of BASIC that became Microsoft's first major product. But not everyone was a fan. In fact, some of the world's top computer scientists hated it. The famous Edsger Dijkstra claimed that learning BASIC's simple, unstructured style would permanently damage a student's ability to think like a proper programmer. The debate was fierce. Was BASIC a brilliant gateway or a dangerous crutch? Despite the criticism, BASIC had already won the war for the hearts and minds of a generation of new programmers. But that leads to the final and maybe most important part of its story. Think about it. If it was so important, why did it disappear? Why aren't we all coding in BASIC right now? Well, the answer is the most beautiful part of this entire story. Years later, BASIC's co-creator Thomas Kurtz explained it perfectly. He said, "BASIC didn't fail. It succeeded so completely that it made itself obsolete. Its mission was to make computing accessible to ordinary people. Today, we use spreadsheets, apps, and touchscreens to do what people once needed BASIC for. The problem it solved is gone. The vision was fulfilled." Today, if you go to Hanover, New Hampshire, you'll find a historical marker. It doesn't celebrate BASIC for being the most powerful or elegant language. It celebrates it for being something far more important: the first user-friendly programming language. And that's the ultimate takeaway, isn't it? The lines of code that made up BASIC are mostly gone, relegated to museums and history books. But Kemeny's vision, that technology should empower everyone, is the foundation of our entire digital world. And that leaves us with a final thought. Every time you use a smartphone, an app, or a website with ease, you are living in the world that John Kemeny imagined. How different would it all be if he hadn't believed way back in the 1960s that the power of computing belonged to us all?